Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to continue our series on parenting tips for the various signs of the zodiac. We're going to give you some parenting tips today for Gemini children. We have already taken a look at Aries and Taurus, so we're going in zodiacal order. If you haven't seen those previous videos in the series and you have kids with Aries or Taurus placements, be sure to check the first two videos in the series out. They may give you some useful insights. And today we're going to be looking at the sign of Gemini and some basic parenting advice that could help you with your kids who have maybe a stellium in Gemini or sun or moon or rising in Gemini. So that is our goal for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you guys today. Make this a community effort. If you have kids that are Geminis or you were raised a Gemini, kid and saw what worked and didn't work with your own parents and how they parented, any and all stories are totally welcome in the chat section. It's been nice to read what you guys have had to share in the previous episodes. Of course, you can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I want to take you over there right now because we're in enrollment season, as you guys know. New class is coming up. It starts in June, and you can find it on the website. Go to the courses page, click on the first year course, scroll down. You can learn about everything that the course includes, hear from some of our alumni, and you're going to find that the class is a year long. It's a class in natal astrology, meaning how to read birth charts from the ancient Hellenistic perspective. So this is like ancient Greek astrology with a modern archetypal twist. And so it's really a great program for people who want to develop their skills as a reader, maybe start a practice of your own, or just deepen your understanding of the language that you love. Astrology is a gift that will give to you personally through your whole life once you learn it at a deeper level. It's really profound how much it can be assisting us in our everyday lives. And then, of course, what to speak of potentially using it to serve other people as well. So 30 classes on the year plus 12 guest lectures, 2 to 3 hours each. They're all held by webinar. Everything's recorded if you can't make it live. We also have breakout study and tutoring sessions in between major units of study led by our staff. We have a group forum discussion with staff that are there to help answer your questions. Tons of reading and listening and optional quizzes and things designed to help you throughout the course. You can talk to me anytime throughout the program. And at the bottom of the page, you're going to find some different options for enrollment. And the one that I want to direct your attention to, the early bird payment course on the left, and then you have a payment plan. But we are also trying to make sure that we get people applying for need-based tuition early in the process. We do have a limited number of those spaces available per program. So if you are interested in studying with us and you need a little help to make that happen financially because you have a fixed budget or you are in a tough spot financially at the time, or, again, a lot of single parents that take advantage of that. So please feel free to use that. Click the Apply Now button and tell us about your situation. We'd be glad to help you out with your tuition and see if we can make studying astrology a little bit easier. So that is, those are the announcements for today. So let's get into talking about the parenting tips for Gemini kids. So, I have a little bit of experience in this. I've, born with Mars in Gemini, so I have a little bit of a Mars in Gemini placement. But this is really, probably best suited for people who have sun, moon, or rising in Gemini or a stellium of planets in Gemini. And I like to frame these in terms of things that we can support. Because as parents, there's nothing worse than feeling like, okay, well, this sign has all these problems and make sure that you fix them or don't let them occur. And, it's good to be aware of what shadows come with each of the signs so that we can be better equipped as parents to help our kids, overcome the potential shadows of their archetypal orientation. But I think it's almost better to look at what a sign is trying to do at its core, in its essence. What is Gemini all about? And once you understand that, then a lot of what end up looking like problems become a part of the attempt to manifest an archetypal, mythos, a mythology in your life. And so much of what we think, I believe this very firmly anyways, that so much of what we think of as problems in our children today are actually probably related on some level to not understanding the myth that the child is trying to live out and how we can help them live the healthiest and most productive version of that myth, so to speak, which does the least damage to themselves and others. So I put all of these in terms of things that we can support, trying to help us get to the core of what the sign is all about. So number one is support curiosity. Gemini is a double-bodied air sign, a masculine sign, the temple of Mercury, and the sign that comes at the very end of the spring season, which means we're in the light half of the year, but we're also reaching this critical turning point, which is why the sign is called double-bodied. Double-bodied, or sometimes in modern terms, it's called mutable. Double-bodied means of two natures simultaneously. And in ancient astrology, this happens because at the very end of spring, although it's the light half of the year, Gemini embodies a transition that will happen by the end of the sign to the initiation of darkness coming back from within the light half of the year, which takes place at the very end of Gemini. So when you like watch the arc of the sun on the ecliptic as it's going through the Gemini phase, it's reaching up and slowing down and making a turnaround. And you can perceive that happening like almost like watching a car approaching a turn. And you can see it slowing down and starting to, lean into the turn by the end. So Gemini embodies a kind of duality between light and dark because it is changing from within the light half of the year to from light rising to darkness rising again within the light. And so one of the most important things to understand about Gemini is that it has this very playful, adaptable, changeable relationship between light and dark, which can be understood in the most basic sense as yin and yang, or masculine and feminine. And so one of the things that comes along with this dual nature and this changeability from light to dark is curiosity. There's a natural interest to know and understand things inside and out, to understand both what something is and what it is not, to not just take something because someone tells you that it's true, but to ask questions and it's kind of like I wouldn't call it skepticism. That's why I kind of use the word curiosity, but it's an inquisitiveness. It's a doubtful, playful, ongoing sense of curiosity and questioning. And this is absolutely fundamental. It can drive you mad. If you have a kid, it might seem like they won't just take what you're saying and they won't just accept it. Or if you have Gemini kids, it can sometimes feel like they're not paying attention, or that they're not necessarily listening, or they're easily distractible. But a lot of this is because the Gemini wheels turn really fast. And sometimes as they're taking in information, they're already sort of deconstructing it in their head, and or poking holes in it, or asking questions of it, or whatever is being taken as a given, they're kind of going, but why? And so if we can understand that part of the beauty of this sign is that divine sense of mental and analytical and philosophical deconstruction, that if we understand that that's a core part of what drives a Gemini lifetime forward, is the ability to take whatever is a given and with a kind of chaos magic to take it apart and to inquire and to open it up and to find hidden layers of meaning within something that's being presented in one way, but could be very well understood in two or three other ways. So that sense of the careful, curious, playful unraveling of givens is so important to how a Gemini finds their path and finds their sense of self. And so, what looks to us like boredom or restlessness, or constant skepticism, or an inability to stay focused or pay attention, often is just it's the manifestation of a mind that's moving very fast and performing operations of like chaos magic on everything that's presented as a given. So you can understand that, you can be a little easier on the kid. And actually, one of the things that works really, really well in parenting, when you see this kind of playful, restless quality, rather than getting frustrated by it or trying to make it bear down and focus, is to be playful with it. When it asks questions, ask it questions in return. So that energy comes through your child and says, but why this, or why that, or I don't understand this, or yeah, but what about that? To say it, rather than trying to further explain and justify a given, to say, well, that's a really good question. I don't know. What do you think? Right? If you turn back the thing you have to be careful for is getting into the position of trying to establish something so foundationally that it can't be questioned, or it can't be, there's no way that it could be taken apart. The Gemini, because the Gemini is like a dog that, it's like it won't let go of the chew toy. So rather than trying to convince your Gemini child of anything, if you put questions back to them, or if you ask an equally thoughtful question when a Gemini asks a question, yeah, that's an interesting question. It also makes me think of this question. And you play that game, you'll often find that it's the stability that you think is lacking, or the focus or the attention or whatever that you think is lacking, is there as soon as questions become the given, right? And rather than defending a given or trying to establish the authority of givens, that you just say, like, that is a good question. I don't know. I don't know is such a powerful statement for a Gemini child to hear from an authority figure, especially when it's done with a little sparkle in your eye. So just remember that. Number 2 is to support experimentation. So, when it comes to Geminis and the sign of Mercury in general and the element of air, this is a very playful is another word, spontaneous is another word, experimental. Sometimes people will say, oh, Geminis, like they never focus on just one thing, or they don't just have one skill. They're a jack of many trades, too many irons in the fire. These are stereotypes, of course. Mercury is a planet that moves back and forth. It changes all the time. It's one of the most changeable planets in the sky next to the moon. And so with that comes adaptability and changeability. And for many Geminis, a correlate is also being experimental, trying things on. Oh, I like that. No, I don't like that. Well, I want to go here to eat. No, maybe I just don't want to go there. Maybe I want to go someplace else. It can feel restless, but you have to remember that even just thinking through things, it's as though a Gemini has to experiment with, well, what would that be like if I did this? And then that was interesting. A little thought experiment that I did there. Not sure I want to do that. I want to do this other thing. Or even, just throughout the life needing to try on a variety of different skills, trades, crafts, courses, and learning programs. So part of that is that the Gemini has to have, it's almost like someone who can read in 6 different languages at the same time, and they can only really understand themselves and the world and live into the myth that they're here to live if they develop a kind of, a multilingual approach to life. And by that, I mean, the ability to speak different languages, whether those languages are crafts or literal languages or different social scenes that they take part in. And that diversification of mind and thought and experience and social life is so important for Geminis. And again, one of the worst things you can do is think to yourself, well, that kid just needs focus. They need to stay committed. They have to learn to make decisions, blah, blah, blah. That's like trying to import a totally foreign program into the Gemini mythology. And oftentimes doesn't really help. So support curiosity, support experimentation, support trying things on. Remember that as Gemini reaches the peak of the year, in the light half of the year, it turns immediately back into darkness. And so that turn from light to darkness, that's certainty to doubt, that's an assertion to a counterclaim, a thesis to antithesis. And so Geminis in life have to explore and experiment with opposites a lot. And the best we can do is to enjoy their experimentation, to actually take joy in it. Like, I love watching you play with these opposites. It's brilliant. It's dazzling. One of the things that helps every sign is to see what it's doing and to, appreciate it and praise it. And ask questions for Geminis. Again, what did you learn from that? What are you thinking about that? What did you like? What didn't you like about that? There's nothing more honoring to a Gemini than asking questions and, getting to hear them talk. One of the things that all Geminis need, all air signs really need, is to be validated for the quality of their communication and their ideas. And so just listening to a Gemini and asking good questions about what they're doing and why they're trying different things on and what their thought process was. Oh, really? Well, because I can explain the whole thing to you. I went all over the place and like that. All right. Well, number 3 is to support changing the mind. This is experimentation. It kind of goes along with it, but this is really important because Geminis will go through phases where they may feel very strongly about something only to call it into question and release it. In the same way that paradigms get replaced in science and in different, industries and in different fields of study and research, a paradigm exists, and then gradually holes get poked in it, and it gets called into question, then it gets released and a new paradigm emerges. People will sometimes look at Geminis and say that they're wishy-washy because they will do this kind of thing often. But the thing is that it's highly adaptable, and it's like it's very stimulating for Geminis to be going through changes in thought and perception and worldviews, to move through one and then look at another. This is part of what makes a Gemini lifetime worth living, and also what helps the Gemini find their sense of essence and purpose, is to go through these changes of mind and perception, to go through changes in how we think, perceive, and relate. So support changes of mind, support the healthy transforming of mind and outlook on life, even if it's day to day. And again, like, I think for people, especially if you're growing up in a family where there's not a lot of air and you're a Gemini kid, it can be really hard because people may find it sort of disturbing, like, someone giving you, like, a Gemini in the room, for some people will feel like they've been given a shot of espresso, and it can feel destabilizing. But rather than trying to stabilize by controlling the Gemini, which is not a good idea, or by trying to get them to focus or commit or settle down or something like that, settle in, right, is to just stay stable in yourself and bring your stability into the way you love and relate to your Gemini kid by appreciating who they are and being like, well, this is so interesting. See, that there's nothing more complimentary to air signs, and especially Gemini, than someone saying, you're interesting to me, and I just want to hear your mind, and I just want to see what you're doing in there. So much of it boils down to just validating who we are, right? All right. Well, the next one is to support intelligence and listening. This is really important because sometimes Geminis are moving so fast that they'll have trouble listening. Oh, you know what? I missed a word here. Let me hide this so I can just, sorry, it wasn't support intelligence. It was support emotional intelligence and listening. There we go. That makes more sense. So one of the shadows of Gemini can be sometimes that it's so heady and so movable, mentally and intellectually, that it can sometimes lack that emotional sensitivity and emotional intelligence, as well as the ability to not just think to the next thought or think to what you're going to say next, or to be constantly turning the wheels and analyzing as people are talking, but to just listen, to hold a space of being receptive intellectually and to being more thoughtful emotionally. So emotional intelligence and listening are sometimes things that Geminis can struggle with, but you can model that for them, for kids especially, mostly in the way that you, like, one great thing to ask a Gemini when they're going through something that they're thinking about, or something that they're interested in, or something that they have questions about, is to stop and say, how does it make you feel? To ask them to bring in the emotions, or how do you think that made me feel? Or how do you think that made someone else feel? So bringing in, just little ways of helping Gemini kids recognize that we're emotional beings, and that we also need to listen to other people as much as we keep a very busy, active, and sort of loud mind. We need to be able to be quiet mentally and listen. And that's not always easy, but a good thing to bring in. And along with that could be, oftentimes it's good to experiment, but can you stick with something? It's good to be curious, but what are your axiomatic truths in your life? For example, I believe it's really important to treat other people as you want to be treated. It's like helping Gemini kids form some basic axioms that guide their life, that they believe in, but it's theirs. They're choosing, and supporting experimentation. But on the other hand, making sure that you see things through. Well, okay, you can discard this, but let's finish it first. And then if you still don't like it, you can go on to the next thing. So sometimes just affirming it's okay to try on different things, but let's finish things that we start. Or it's okay to be curious and constantly skeptical, but what are some things that are, very basic truths for you that guide and shape your actions, your values, support changing the mind about things, but also it's important to to let Gemini kids know, like, it's okay to be invested in a way of doing things or thinking about things for a while. It's inevitable that things will change, but that doesn't mean that you can't buy into something for a little bit. So support emotional intelligence and listening is another, potential shadow area where we can just help kids by saying, how do you feel? Let's go beyond the thoughts and the words and the ideas and the concepts into our feelings. And let's talk about that. Talking is still allowed, but let's talk about feelings. Let's talk about why they are important. And also let's learn to listen very deeply. In fact, one of the ways that you can spin it with kids is, like Gemini's, we had a yoga studio, of course. And so I had the chance to observe a lot of teen kids who came through. Gemini teenagers are amazingly open to the kind of meta talk around meditation, of what happens underneath, what happens in the subtle body, what's going on when we go below thoughts. Surprisingly, I think that's an area of real interest and curiosity for air signs, as much as you might hear that, like, well, air signs are going to be too restless to meditate. I don't think that's necessarily true, but it requires that we talk about listening as a kind of intellectual art form that can be delved into and explored. And if you put it that way, I think you'll find that Gemini kids are game for going into spaces of listening, especially when it's framed like a game. We're going to go deep sea fishing in the unconscious and see what comes up through deep, penetrating listening. So emotional intelligence and listening. And then finally is support the play of light and dark. There's a mischievous quality to Gemini and an experimentation between good and bad, light and dark, acceptable and unacceptable, so the boundaries and pushing the boundaries and playing between opposites is important. That doesn't mean a Gemini kid is deceptive or two-faced. It doesn't mean that a Gemini kid is dishonest. It doesn't mean that a Gemini kid is a thief and a trickster, some of these kind of like more pejorative ways of looking at Gemini. So Gemini is forever a bit of a magician, and it does embody a little of the trickster archetype, but that's okay. The trickster is one of the most important archetypes that we have. Hermes is the guide of souls, taking us down into the underworld. It can go, Hermes can go into Hades and come back out. And so we need a sign like Gemini that will explore between opposites and to encourage. Well, that was interesting. You have such different aspects of your personality. It's so fascinating to me. Where there is appreciation and less of an attempt to control a Gemini, you will find that the Gemini has a mirror to look in that will do the refining that needs to happen for them. All you have to do is hold up a mirror for a Gemini, and that play of light and dark will be something that a Gemini can reflect upon. And it doesn't happen when you try to tell them what to think or how to do or what's moral or what's good or what's bad or, what's committed or you're too ambivalent or you're too restless and this is how you should be, get more serious, or none of that stuff really works. What does work is to say, wow, it's so interesting to see what you're doing. Again, I love seeing how you play with opposites. You say smart things like that to Gemini kids when they're going through stuff, then they have to take that pattern and look at it. And when they do look at it, that's when amazing, personal growth happens. And you'll often find that the exact qualities that need a little bit more developing are developed because the Gemini gets to choose and consider those qualities for themselves, rather than someone telling them this is a given, go do it. So you have to be a little bit of a playful, mercurial ninja yourself. You have to enter into the play of the light and dark and the opposites with Geminis. If you want to get anywhere with your kids and not have them feel like, you're something yourself to be called into question all the time. The more that we present ourselves as identified with givens and rules and commands and things like that for Geminis, as opposed to being like, okay, I might be that's fun. So I might be your parent, but I'm also an observer of you and an appreciator of you. And when you keep your judgments to yourself, the Gemini will feel the presence of your thoughts about maybe how they could be behaving a little better or doing something a little bit differently. They'll get to consider that on their own because of how you mirror and appreciate their own process. Very important to give Geminis a lot of independence mentally. So anyway, those are my 5 tips for parenting, tips for Gemini kids that I've often given over the years to parents. Again, I'm not any kind of parenting guru. This is just simple stuff that's been born out of my practice over the years. I hope that you can take it and do something useful for your kids if you have some Geminis in your life. And also, please add to the conversation by telling us, some things that have worked for you over the years. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget before you leave to like and subscribe. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com, where you can also be sure to check out all of our latest courses. And don't forget the need-based tuition option. We're asking people to apply for that early if you plan to. We do have a limited number of those available. Okay, that's it for today. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.